Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're visiting the Wright Brothers National Memorial in the heart of the Outer Banks in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. First up, we have the Wright Brothers Visitor Center, where there's a museum, a flight room, and a store. I'm going to take you with me as I go through the museum, as well as the grounds and the actual memorial itself. And stay tuned for a really cool visual of a replica glider actually in the air. This museum tells the story of Wilbur and Orville Wright, also known as the Wright Brothers. They're credited with being the first in flight, or the first to fly a controlled, powered, heavier-than-air airplane. As you go through the museum, you learn all about how they got to that fateful day back in 1903. This section talks about their family life. The boys were 2 of 7 children. This is a flying toy that their father showed them back in 1878, and the brothers credit it with sparking their early interest in flight. But that interest lay dormant for a while, and the brothers went on to establish a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio in 1892, where they capitalized on the bicycle craze sweeping the nation at the end of the 19th century. It would be a few years later that aviation would become a central focus in their lives. In this section, you can see some of the pioneers in the field of aviation. The one who was most influential to the Wright brothers was Otto Lilienthal, who was a German aeronautical pioneer who conducted extensive research on wing aerodynamics, and he designed and flew several gliders which he controlled by shifting his body weight to and fro. Lilienthal died after a glider accident in 1896. Lilienthal's death reawakened or reignited the Wright brothers' interest in the problems of flight, and in May of 1899, Wilbur Wright wrote to the Smithsonian Institution requesting publications and recommendations for reading on aeronautics. He wanted to learn all he could on the existing body of knowledge on aeronautical research. The brothers wanted to look at what had come before and build upon it, with the belief that they could take it to the finish line. They believed that they could solve the final problem of flight, which was control in the air, and a motor to keep it in the air to travel long distances. So their first priority was figuring out control of an aircraft. The aircraft would need to be controllable in 3 axes of motion, called roll, pitch, and yaw, which you can see in this diagram. Observing birds in flight and how they change the shape of their wings as they glide, the Wright brothers came up with the idea of wing warping, or aircraft wings that flexed to maneuver in the air. They felt that this was the answer. But they had to put it to the test, and the question then was, where? The location to do these tests would need to be just right. Wilbur wrote to the United States Weather Bureau requesting information on wind velocities around the country, and the brothers eventually got in touch with the Weather Bureau in Kitty Hawk in North Carolina's Outer Banks. They confirmed that it was a windy place, there weren't many trees, and there was a lot of sand for soft landings. So with that, the matter was settled. That is where the brothers were headed. Back in 1900, the Outer Banks was completely different than it is today. It was really only inhabited by fishermen and their families, and those who worked at the life-saving service out there. Interesting fact, a lot of those inhabitants at that time in the Outer Banks were descendants of sailors who had been shipwrecked at the Outer Banks. So again, comparing it to how the Outer Banks is today, that's quite a difference. So the brothers went to Kitty Hawk in both 1900 and 1901 to conduct their gliding experiments. They would take their aircraft, bring it up to the top of a sand dune, and glide off sort of like a kite, and observe, try to control it in the air, and make adjustments as necessary. But it was in 1901 that they realized that the data that they had been using to calculate lift was just not producing the desired results. This is data that had come from other people's experiments and were accepted in the field as accurate. But the Wright brothers felt that their experiments were proving otherwise, so what they'd need is new data. So in 1901, they went back to Dayton, Ohio, and built a small wind tunnel to do more calculations and gather new data. Now, with this new data that they got from their own experiments, plus some design improvements they made to their glider, they went back to Kitty Hawk in 1902 to put it all to the test. And eventually, with that new data, along with some tweaking they did to the rudder, they achieved success and they were able to actually control the craft in the air. So that was the 1902 glider, and if you want to know what that looked like in the air, check out this reproduction of that 1902 glider that we came across when we were in the Outer Banks. We just happened to be at the sand dune and saw people flying this glider, and it was incredible to see in action. So with the success of their 1902 glider, the next step was adding a motor to their design. The exact specifications that they would need for a motor did not exist anywhere, so they had to design and build it themselves, assisted very heavily by their bicycle shop mechanic named Charles Taylor, who was instrumental in this motor's creation. When it was finished, the engine produced 12 horsepower, and it, along with an updated propeller system, would be put to the test again back in Kitty Hawk in the winter of 1903. Then, on December 17, 1903, with a wooden rail in the sand to assist in takeoff, they achieved their first flight with a motorized aircraft. They would go on to do 4 flights in total that day, and I'm going to take you outside soon to show you where it happened and what those distances actually looked like of those first flights. The boys sent home this telegram that very day, sharing their success, but nobody really reacted to the news because I guess nobody really seemed to register its significance. It is widely accepted in the US that the Wright brothers were the first in flight, but I know there's a lot of controversy on the subject and people seem to have very strong opinions about other contenders. If you have expertise on this, feel free to explain what evidence you base your opinion on. But back to the Wright brothers. 1903 did not mark the end of it all. It was really only the beginning, because the Wright brothers would go on tweaking their design for years, with the first public flight taking place in 1908. This is a full-size, accurate reproduction of the 1903 flyer, so the first airplane. It's really beautiful to look at. It's like this pretty white bird. Imagine having never seen anything like it, never seen anything really fly, and then seeing this beautiful thing. I'm pretty sure there's a quote, like, the prettiest bird I ever saw. This here is the front, that there is the back. It is a bit confusing because this sort of looks like the back of a plane. Orville would be lying on his stomach here, facing that way. You can see the engine that they built specifically for this, with minimal vibrations and 12 horsepower. Wow, this is the real propeller from their 1903 flyer. Sorry about the reflections, they're sort of unavoidable. So here we have wing fabric from the 1903 flyer, and if we push a button, the Wright brothers had a heck of a time dealing with their patents, and there were lots of lawsuits that they filed against people that they felt were infringing on their patents. They applied for a patent in 1903 and it was granted in 1906, and this is what it looks like. The first 3 flights from December 17th, 1903, you see right here. 1, 2, 3. This being the starting point. Then the 4th one took off from here and went all the way there. Now let's head outside and retrace those steps, as it were, of that fateful day. So here we have the reasons that Kitty Hawk was chosen. Wind that helped with lift, sand for a soft landing, and privacy. So this is how it used to look. Does not look that way now. Over here we have a replica of the camp that they had set up during their time in Kitty Hawk. This is where they would live and work and eat in between flights. This is where they'd hold the plane. Their hangar. So this is the spot from which those first 4 flights took off. And the stone was placed here in 1928, so 25 years after the day that it happened. As you can see, the dedication of this monument, Orville was actually present, and even Amelia Earhart was present. So they built a 60-foot wooden rail with metal stripping to provide a hard and smooth surface for takeoff. You see again here, here's the liftoff point. 1, 2, 3. The farthest one being 852 feet. I'm gonna run that distance in 59 seconds, so this is what it would have looked like. So imagine I'm an airplane. End of the first flight. End of the second. End of the third. I'm out of breath. That's a long way to go. Good job, Wilbur. It's pretty cool to be in the spot where it happened. Whether or not you believe they were the first, it's still an interesting bit of American history, you know? You probably can't hear that, but there's an airplane going overhead. What a lovely juxtaposition. What a lovely confluence of these two things. Success! Let's go tell the world. Now we're walking all the way up to the monument on top of Big Devil Hill, which was one of the big sand dunes here where the brothers would launch from. Keep in mind that the spots of their 1903 flights with the motor, with the engine, that is on level ground because the point was to have powered flight, a heavier than air aircraft taking off under its own power, becoming airborne. The hills were used to test wing shape and control, steering, and level ground was where they did proof of concept. I cannot imagine lugging a plane up that hill. I lugged myself up that hill and I'm out of breath. Back in 1900, 1901, 02, 03, this is not what it would have looked like. It wouldn't be so developed. The idea of a changing landscape is very interesting. The idea that these sand dunes that used to be here have all shifted. This one was only saved by being supported by plants. They planted a bunch of grass to stabilize it so that it wouldn't keep shifting, and then we could preserve this iconic spot. We're arriving at our final stop here at the Wright Brothers National Memorial, and I'll take this second to ask, if you guys are enjoying this video, please hit subscribe if you haven't already. That really helps me out. And also, if you're interested in seeing some behind the scenes content, travel vlogs, the first to know about new antiques that I buy, check out my Patreon, which I recently launched. I'll put the link in my video description, and let's explore this last stop. This is a recreation of that fateful day in 1903 when Orville took that first flight. And it is really cool because you can put yourself in their shoes and imagine you're there as one of the multiple witnesses. If you had trouble visualizing it all before, here we have statues of all those who were present. Wilbur having just let go of the right side of the wing, stabilizing it for takeoff. Orville. There were a number of witnesses to that first flight, which you can see here, all of their names. And interestingly, it was the surviving witnesses in 1928 who helped to locate where that stone marker would go, so the exact spot of takeoff of those 4 flights in 1903. Since they had witnessed the flights, they were able to help figure out the exact placement. This is John T. Daniels, a resident of Kitty Hawk. He's the one who snapped the shot. One of the most famous photos in American history. And that's just about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learning all about the Wright brothers with me and visiting the Wright Brothers National Memorial. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.